He had many nicknames. The Uncontrollable, a sword master stuck in his room, a man out of his mind, Count Perdium's useless oldest son, Ghislaine Perdium. The knight he was facing couldn't believe that he was defeated by a garbage human like Ghislaine. Even though he held the title of the best knight of the North, Ghislaine says that he had to put a lot of money into making the trap. While walking up to the knight, he asks if the knight liked his trap. The knight asks if Ghislaine knew about his plans all along. Ghislaine says that that was not all he knew. He also knew how many they had, who the spies around him were, and who helped the knights with reinforcements. Ghislaine says that he knew the knight's every move from the very start. The knight couldn't believe it. He was never this helpless before. He always had a hidden ace. He asks how a useless piece of shit like Ghislaine dared to win against him. Ghislaine kicks him in the face before he finishes his yapping and asks the knight to shut up. Ghislaine says that they could try to invade as many times as they want and warns them that he will win the war every single time. A year ago, at the Lithania kingdom near the Perdium estate, Ghislaine wakes up in a panic inside his tent, surprised to be alive. Just a second ago, he was beaten in combat, while covered in blood and barely breathing. His opponent says that it was a fitting end to one of the 7 strongest men on the continent, and addresses him as the mercenary king, Ghislaine Perdium. With a light smile, she says that the war was finally over. She was the noble knight, Idun. She points her sword at him and asks if he had any last words, to which he quickly says that he has none and that it's just a little shameful for him not to be able to fulfill his revenge. He curses the noble knight to die a sickening death. Idun says that Ghislaine was still quite arrogant. Idun says that she didn't expect him to be the oldest son of a fallen household, one who abandoned the household after his sister died. Ghislaine asks how a knight from a different country knew so much about him. Idun says that it was a given since she had to work so hard to try to track him, because she was the one who worked with the Delphine household to bring down his family. Ghislaine didn't know that there were other people involved in his family's downfall. She says that there was no need to explain any further since he was a dead man anyway. Ghislaine snaps, saying that he would never forgive them. She says that it's all right and removes his head. He remembered that as his last moment, but yet now his head was still on his shoulder. He wondered if he was in a hallucination and asks why he looked so young. He wondered if he was being used as a lab rat by the enemy mages and swears to make the enemy regret keeping him alive. Just then, someone calls out to him as young master. It was one of the Perdium soldiers who requests Ghislaine to come outside. Before he finishes the sentence, there was a knife at his neck and Ghislaine was behind him. Ghislaine says that the soldier's life depends on the answers he provides. The soldier realizes that it was Ghislaine, sighs, and asks if Ghislaine wasn't crossing the line this time. Ghislaine is confused at the soldier's reaction and asks what he meant. The soldier pushes him off and says that Ghislaine tired himself out from the tantrum he was throwing and fell unconscious. Ghislaine says that he would never do such a thing. The soldier asks if Ghislaine forgot about the tantrum he was throwing about wanting to be in command of the orc raiding party. Ghislaine looked at the soldier as if he was saying something crazy. He tells the soldier to stop the nonsense, and the soldier starts packing Ghislaine's stuff while asking him to go out quick as he was making people wait. Ghislaine asks where they were going, and the soldier says that, of course, they were going to the Perdium estate. Hearing that, he quickly grabs the soldier's shoulder and asks him to say it again. Ghislaine asks if the soldier was talking about the fallen Perdium estate. When they reached the estate, it was nothing like the town he had seen reduced to ashes. The soldier whispers, asking if Ghislaine had a nightmare to call his own household a fallen one. He warns that Ghislaine might get kicked out of the family if his father heard about it. Ghislaine pulls his cheek to see if he was dreaming, but it doesn't work. A younger face and an estate that wasn't yet fallen, meaning he had come back to his past. He had resented his household when he was young. He was a troublemaker, and almost all of the people from the household started avoiding him as time went on. Unable to withstand their criticism, he had run away from home, and several years later he had become a mercenary. He had survived countless battles, built up his name, and made a name for himself. When he had returned to the country to make up for his previous mistakes, the household had already been crushed to dust. He had lost everything, but now it was all back. All those he held dear were still alive. He starts to laugh, but it was too early to rejoice. He remembered that the soldier said they were there for an orc raid. He remembered that day clearly, as most of the raid squad was wiped out. In the past, he followed the raid party in hopes of making a name for himself. The report stated that there were only 3 orcs. He thought it would be easy enough for someone like him, even with no experience commanding a squad. But when they got there were more than 20 orcs. Almost all of them died because he had been stubborn and wanted to command the squad. The raid would be doable since the orcs were clueless, but the problem was that his men saw him as a useless troublemaker, and they didn't trust his decisions. While he was thinking of a way to get the men to trust him, a watch post flies over his head and crashes in front of him. The soldiers shout that it was the orcs. As orcs rush into the camp, weapons out, he wondered if they got attacked like this in his last life too. The unprepared soldiers get pummeled by the orcs. "Get in formation," a man shouts. He tells them not to panic and asks them to hold defensive formation. It was the raid squad commander, Skaven. One of them immediately starts attacking him. The commander, even though he looked composed, was panicking inside, thinking that there were way more than the numbers reported and they got attacked while they had their guard down. Ghislaine warns the commander about an orc behind him. It was too late for the commander to move, but with an explosive lunge, Ghislaine grabs the commander and pulls him away, surprising him. The orc went forward with his attack and Ghislaine precisely pierces the orc's hand, slashing its weapon hand and leg clean off. The commander and the soldiers could not believe it. The orc screams in pain before falling to the ground with a huge crash due to its massive size. He scoffs, saying that he couldn't even use mana, wishing that he was put further into the past. After sheathing his sword, he asks if the commander was all right while giving him a hand to stand back up. The commander was still in shock. He asks the commander to give over the command rights to him. The commander knows that Ghislaine is an idiot, but to ask for the command rights when the lives of soldiers were on the line was too much. The commander refuses and walks past him. He asks if Ghislaine thinks this was a game, and even though Ghislaine was the son of the Lord, the commanders couldn't just hand over the authority given to him so easily. Ghislaine finds it annoying, but he would have done the same. Another orc approaches them. The commander quickly comes between the orc and Ghislaine and says that he will take care of it, as Ghislaine was still inexperienced to lead the troops. With no other choice left, Ghislaine throws his sword at the orc, barely missing the commander. The commander gets angry and grabs Ghislaine by the collar to ask if he was crazy. He then hears the orc fall to its knees. When he looks back, the sword had pierced through the orc's head. The orc falls to the ground and the commander, still shocked, wonders how Ghislaine hit the weak spot so precisely. Ghislaine asks the commander what he thought was the most important thing in the battle. The soldiers were terrified of the orcs and their high numbers. Ghislaine explains that there was no hope as long as the troops were filled with fear. He says that they need to gain momentum. Ghislaine rushes past the commander while grabbing the sword that was stuck inside the orc's head, jumping over the defensive shield wall straight to the raging orcs, landing on the head of one of the orcs with his sword going through its head, surprising the soldiers and the commander once more. While pulling his sword out again, he asks the orcs to come at him at once, warning that he would kill them all alone, then rushing into the group of orcs again, cutting their limbs off as he dodges and weaves through them effortlessly. Seeing the orcs' heads and limbs fall off, the commander wonders if he was dreaming. Even as a mana user, it was hard for the commander to do anything against the orcs, but the skinny young master was slaughtering the orcs all by himself. The commander could tell that Ghislaine was already tired. However, he was using the bare minimum movements needed to dodge attacks and striking at spots that are guaranteed to kill or immobilize. A swordmaster without any mana or something greater. Ghislaine starts mocking the orcs, asking if this was all they had. He tells them that they weren't living up to the reputation of the warrior species. A soldier says that all the orcs just charged at Ghislaine, ignoring the others. The soldier tries to ask the commander for instructions. The commander was confused himself. Ghislaine ran into the group of orcs to draw attention, but now suddenly ran away when all of them were following him, and the direction he was going was the edge of the cliff. He realizes Ghislaine was planning to use the cliff. The commander quickly asks the remaining soldiers to raise a shield wall and asks them to follow the young master. While running towards the cliff, Ghislaine thinks that Commander Skaven must have realized his intentions by now. Although Ghislaine would prefer to slaughter the rest of the orcs himself, his shitty stamina won't match the orcs. As they reach the edge, he smiles, and the orcs who were following him turn back to see the commander and the troops with a shield wall. Ghislaine says that it was perfect and jumps off the cliff. While asking them to push in, the commander gives the order. The troops close in on the orcs with spears. With their movements restricted in the hordes, the troops push in with little restriction and manage to push off all the orcs off the cliff, straight to their deaths. The soldier realizes that they just won. The commander shouts for Ghislaine while looking over the cliff. He was holding on to the sword which he drove into the cliff. He smiles, and the commander also smiles back while extending his hand. Ghislaine's hand slips and he falls off. As the world around him fades, he remembers his sister, Elena, when she was sad when their mom had passed. When she was thanking him for being with her. When she asked why he was acting weird and throwing tantrums. When she had lost hope in him and called him the worst brother. All those memories came back to him. While he was looking at the memories, he gets pulled by the shoulders by his sister, who asks him to go with her. He wakes up, in his room. He was glad that he was still alive, wondering if the memories with Elena were just a dream. His whole body feels a jolt of pain, likely because of pushing himself too far. Just then, the door opens. A woman in a maid dress walks in, asking if he was finally awake. He remembered her very well. It was Belinda. She asks if he knew how worried she was and scolds him for intervening in the fight even though she asked him to let the soldiers handle it. Before she could continue, he hugs her tightly. She asks if something was wrong, and he tells her that he was just glad to see her. She was his personal maid and tutor. Since he was a kid, she was the only one who had stayed with him despite his idiotic antics. After his family fell, she went missing and he was no longer able to see her. He never thought he could see her again. Belinda asks what there was to be so happy about when they saw each other every day. He thinks that he should tell everything to her. He tells her about the impending catastrophe which will strike Perdium soon. She asks what he was saying, and he tells her that he came back from the dead. Belinda thinks that he was talking about the orcs, which almost killed him. He tells her that's not what he meant. She asks if he knew that he was the one in greater danger than Perdium. She starts to continue her motherly lecture again, and he thinks that telling her won't work. She asks what he was going to do if he was too hurt to go to the festival. The festival, he thinks. Belinda tells him that his sister Elena had been waiting for months for the festival to go out with him. Belinda says that it would be a great chance for the both of them to make up. He remembers the festival quite well. In his last time, he didn't have time to enjoy the festival because of the traumatic experience at the orc raid. How long till the festival? He asks. She tells him that he has about 1 week till the festival. While he thought about the festival, the day that changed his life last time, his sister opens the door, asking if he was inside. The memories of the festival still haunted him. She had begged him to go with her to the festival. It was the day his sister had died. She cautiously looks at him from the door. Waiting for him to answer, he pulls her in and hugs her tightly, just like Belinda. Belinda is surprised at his boldness. Elena blushes and asks if he was pranking her. He tells her that he missed her. She pushes him away while saying that he was creeping her out. She had amazing strength, he noted. Elena dusts herself off and says that she was there only because Belinda asked her to be, and asks if a hug was going to make everything all right between them. He asks what she means. She reminds him how he told her that she pisses him off because of how annoying she was, how her breath felt disgusting, and many more mean things. He wonders if he said that. He apologizes to her, thinking that he was a complete piece of shit. Belinda and Elena couldn't believe it. Elena asks if an orc hit him in the head. He swears that he dealt with the orcs and asks why they keep implying he got hit. Just then, he feels another jolt of pain and falls to the floor. Elena giggles and says that he totally got all the orcs in this state even though he came back unconscious. Seeing Elena and Belinda smile, he forgets about his pain and smiles himself, thinking they were just as he remembered. He wondered why he wasted so much time apart from them. In the past, he had rejected Elena's offer to go together because he was upset about the orc raid. That was the last time he saw her. She was found shredded to pieces along with her bodyguards. He blames himself for what happened. They hear a knock at the door. Elena's bodyguards, Jamal and Philip. Elena asks if anything happened since she asked them to wait outside. The guard says that a servant asked her to oversee their work on the festival supplies. Ghislaine asks why they would ask Elena. Belinda scolds him for his ignorance since he lazes around all day. She tells him that since there was such a shortage of workers in Perdium, even his sister had to work. His sister leaves with the guards, asking him to take care of himself. He didn't care about any of this in his past life, so it was obvious that he didn't know. Before his sister walks out, he asks her to let him help her. She turns back, surprised. This time, they seriously consider that he got hit in the head by an orc. Outside, where the preparations were going on, they start to fight. Ghislaine says that he wants to help. Elena tells him to go away since people will be too scared to work around him. He asks if this was how she treated someone who wanted to help. She tells him that he could help by staying out of their way and out of trouble. His sister was found dead near the slums, far away from the festival grounds, so someone must have called her out there or forcibly moved her there. To prevent that, he had to know the ins and outs of the castle first. Just then, a knight rushes toward them. Ghislaine remembers his face, old man Fergus. Fergus starts crying while saying that he made his way over as soon as he heard about the news with the orcs. Ghislaine asks if they can stop talking about the orcs now. His sister takes the chance and tells the old man to take her brother back to his room since he's been acting weird after waking up. The old man says that he will do as she wishes. He can't force his sister, so he gives up and makes up his mind to learn about the castle sometime within the week. He asks the old man to take him to the abandoned training field. The old man asks what Ghislaine wants to do at a training field. Ghislaine says that he wants to train. The old man never knew those words could come out of Ghislaine's mouth. The old man takes him to the field. Ghislaine says that the training field looked to be in much better condition for being called abandoned. The weapons also looked well maintained and clean. The old man says that he kept the facilities well maintained, hoping one day Ghislaine would come there. Although he was certain Ghislaine was only going through a phase, Ghislaine wondered how long into his life the old man continued to maintain the facilities in his past life. He feels ashamed of himself. Ghislaine says that he needs to live a long life, as dying felt like shit. The old man is confused, as Ghislaine was acting like he had already experienced life and death. Ghislaine says that the old man was very sharp and tells him that he was resurrected after death. The old man says that was enough tomfoolery about death. Ghislaine says that the old man is free to go rest, and the old man bows while saying that he will stay guard outside. Inside, he had treated them like his enemies, but he was just short-sighted. He had a week to train. Back in the past, it was revealed that the one behind his sister's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. And thanks to that, Perdium was caught in a war which led to its downfall, essentially making her death the starting point of the household's downfall. He had to set things straight. First of all, he had to work on his physique to at least withstand mana control. He starts meditating. For most people, noticing and taking in the mana was the hardest part, but he was able to do it even on the chaotic battlefield. He started by connecting the floating mana particles in the air and bundling them up as if he was spinning a spool. For someone who had experienced thousands of battles, creating a core was a piece of cake, but with that alone, he wouldn't have made it to the 7 strongest in the land. With a method he had learned from a half-burned book, along with the natural core for humans, he was able to create a second and a third core, creating a mesh of multiple cores to create explosive force. His nose bleeds from the burden being put on his untrained body. He was only able to make 3 cores. In his peak past life, he had 5 cores. Although having 5 cores would allow him to create explosive force output for a short while, it would also need an extremely large amount of mana in return. That was the main reason he lost to Idun in his past life. They had brought the whole Knight's Order to fight him even when he was out of mana. Even though his technique was inherently unstable, he now had a youthful body and a lot of time. He promises to take Idun's head this time, along with all those helping House Delphine behind the scenes. He promises to destroy them all. 1 week later, on the day of the festival, he prepares for a fight, along with assortments like smoke bombs, just in case. When he made it to the festival ground, his sister was surprised to see that he really came. Even though he would always avoid social gatherings, he lies that it was his duty as a Perdium to come to at least a festival once a year. She says that he's been acting really odd these days. She was told that he had been doing nothing but training for the whole week. He asks if it was wrong for the next in line of the Knight family to train. She reminds him that he was the one who said he didn't care about it before. He had told her that their father was very annoying and that he wished he was Lord already. His sister tells him that she likes this, how they are now, better than before. He was just like when they were kids now. He had realized something in this 1 week he had lived in the past. Because of the change in his actions, his reputation and future were slowly changing. Belinda was warning Alina's guards to keep Ghislaine in check in case he created trouble. Even though the general flow of things was the same, it was difficult to gauge the impact of his actions on small events. Armed with the information from the future, it was his responsibility to respond to each situation effectively. His preparations were complete. While at the festival and while he was being dragged around by his sister, he was always on guard. It was really fun, his sister says. But also a little boring since there wasn't anything new from last year. Even though the festival was almost over, nothing had happened. He wondered if that was because he was with her. Just then, one of the guards asks if she wants to check the other areas too. He tells her that his friend told him about an event elsewhere. That piqued his sister's interest and she goes with him. He realizes who the culprits were, the traitors of the house, Alina's personal guards. Her escort knights were the most trusted in the feud, having protected Alina since she was a child. They arrived at the location the guard had mentioned, an empty, dirty area deep in the slums. Alina looked around, confused as to how a performance could happen in such a place. The guard assured her it wasn't prepared yet and that people would arrive soon, but she didn't believe a performance could take place in a place like this. Ghislaine scanned the surroundings. As expected, even though it looked like a deserted street, the strategic placement of obstacles made it clear this was a trap. They had prepared this ambush in advance. Suddenly, Alina grabbed Ghislaine's arm and pulled him, begging him to return home with her. The knights tried to stop her, but she didn't want to stay there a moment longer. Ghislaine joked about her surprising strength, asking if she'd been secretly working out. One of the knights stepped in front of her with a cold, menacing expression. She grew uneasy, realizing the knights were acting strangely. The lead knight tried to reassure her, saying they didn't mean to scare her, but his expression stayed harsh. He claimed a reasonable request had come in. Before Alina could respond, 3 hooded men appeared from the shadows. The one in the center praised the knights for their clean work. The knights confirmed that they had brought the young lady as promised and asked to conclude the deal. The hooded man noticed Ghislaine and seemed confused. They hadn't asked for him. Alina clung to her brother, clearly terrified. One of the knights casually said Ghislaine had followed them on his own and offered to hand him over for free, calling him foolish for walking into what would become his grave. Ghislaine's tone shifted. He asked the knight, Jamal, if he truly thought he could get away after betraying the house. Jamal coldly told him to worry about himself, saying they were done with this barbaric land and that many others were leaving Perdium as well, so it wouldn't matter. Before he could finish, Ghislaine cut him cleanly in half with a single slash, stunning everyone present. He reminded the corpse that those who left before him didn't sell the house out. Turning to the other knight, Philip, Ghislaine asked if he didn't agree. Philip grabbed Alina, questioning how a knight like Jamal could lose to an amateur. A moment later, Ghislaine's sword went straight through his head. Philip's final words were of disbelief, but they were cut off by death. Alina ran to her brother. One of the hooded men, surprised, asked if this was really Ghislaine Perdium, the eldest son with no formal training or combat experience. The man in the middle confirmed it. Despite having almost no effort, Ghislaine had taken down 2 seasoned knights. Alina, in tears, asked what was happening. Ghislaine gently knocked her out with a strike to the neck, telling her to rest for a while. The mysterious man thanked Ghislaine for dealing with the knights, claiming they were planning to handle it themselves. He asked if Ghislaine had been hiding his skills all along. Ghislaine responded indifferently, asking what difference it made. He could tell that the 2 men standing behind the leader were nothing more than disposable grunts, but the man in the middle was different, stronger, and much more dangerous. Ghislaine decided to end things quickly. Before attacking, he asked who sent them. The hooded man simply replied that dead men didn't need to know. Ghislaine had expected that. As he drew his sword, he muttered that they'd spill the truth soon enough. One of the men asked if they should kill him. The leader ordered them to capture Ghislaine alive and break all his limbs so he'd go mad. Both charged at once. Ghislaine threw a bomb. As they focused on it, the device split midair, revealing that Ghislaine was already upon one of them, his sword piercing straight through the man's skull. The second attacker scoffed at the trick, swinging from behind. Ghislaine blocked it by raising his sword over his shoulder, then swiftly wrapped his arm around the attacker's blade and disarmed him. A clean decapitation followed. An attack came from behind. It looked like it hit, but Ghislaine had blocked it using the fallen enemy's sword. The leader began to sweat, shocked that Ghislaine had parried a strike from his blind spot. Ghislaine rolled and countered with a sharp slash. The man's pipe and hair were sliced in half, but he narrowly escaped with his life. He tried to strike back, but Ghislaine blocked with both swords. The enemy commented that if Ghislaine had any less mana, he would have already been beheaded. Ghislaine wondered how the man survived a strike to the neck. The mysterious attacker remarked on Ghislaine's strange swordsmanship and how impressive it was for someone so young. But it was unfortunate, he said, because Ghislaine was going to die here. The man scoffed, saying Ghislaine could never defeat him with such feeble mana. But Ghislaine simply smiled. Noticing the smile, the man raised his weapon to strike again, only for Ghislaine to use the momentum of the attack to roll in and land a brutal kick to his jaw, sending him flying back. Staggering to his feet, the man calmly adjusted his hat and taunted that Ghislaine's attacks wouldn't work with so little mana. But mid-sentence, he coughed up blood. Confusion washed over his face. Ghislaine's strike had pierced through his enhancement. Ghislaine slowly walked toward him. He said that in his previous life, he never found out who was behind Alina's death. But this moment, this confrontation, felt different from any of the thousands of battles he had fought. Then, without warning, he unleashed his third core. The man's eyes widened. He couldn't comprehend how Ghislaine was suddenly radiating so much power. In the blink of an eye, Ghislaine vanished and appeared right in front of him, blades drawn, aiming for his neck with overwhelming speed. The man tried to defend, but Ghislaine's movements were far too fast. He was relentless, every blow tighter, stronger, sharper. The man was getting pushed back, cornered. His arms started going numb just from blocking. His sword cracked under the pressure. Panic set in. This wasn't swordsmanship. It was like facing a god of war. With a single strike, Ghislaine shattered his opponent's blade and carved a clean slash across his chest. Then came the finishing blow, a sword driven deep into his torso. As the man screamed, Ghislaine grabbed his neck and slammed him against the wall. Ghislaine offered him a final chance to continue the conversation they left off earlier. Who ordered his sister's death? Desperation filled the man's eyes. He pulled out a hidden blade, hoping to at least take Alina with him, but when he tried to throw it, his hand wouldn't move. Ghislaine had bound him with invisible mana threads. He gave the man a choice: talk and he might live. The man was stunned. He hadn't even noticed the strings being formed. Ghislaine told him that someone like him should be able to patch up his wounds, but it wouldn't matter, because he was about to destroy his mana core. The man froze. Ghislaine raised his sword like a conductor, channeling power directly into the core. Agonizing pain erupted within the man's body. His mana spiraled out of control, scattering inside him. Panicked, the man warned that if his core exploded, everything in the area would be destroyed. Ghislaine coldly replied that such a thing only applied to the unskilled. He could manage something that simple. Cracks spread across the man's body. He knew Ghislaine wasn't bluffing. He saw death in his eyes. Then, at last, the man spoke. It was Count Desmond. He was the one who ordered Alina's death. He needed a pretext to start a war with Perdium and bring down the noble houses. Ghislaine had his answer. In his past life, these underground dealings were brushed off and left to the Duke's allied families to investigate. But now, he saw it clearly. Duke Delphine was orchestrating it all from the shadows. Ghislaine asked if that was everything. The man swore it was. So Ghislaine drove his sword fully through him. The man coughed blood and chuckled weakly. This wasn't what Ghislaine had promised, but Ghislaine asked if a man who'd killed so many was now scared of death. The man laughed bitterly. He knew it was over. He told Ghislaine that nothing would change, that no one would believe him, that Perdium was destined to fall. Ghislaine silenced him with a blow to the head and said that he had been reborn after dying once, and this time no one could stop him. Then he exploded the man's core. Just as the sky lit up with the fireworks of the festival, the man's body burst from within, erased from the world. He had saved his sister. She still lay there, sleeping peacefully. Ghislaine looked at her, relieved it was over. He dropped his sword and let out a deep breath. But blood gushed from his mouth. Exploding 3 cores simultaneously had once been nothing when he was the mercenary king. But now, even handling one was a burden. He couldn't collapse yet. Dragging himself to a nearby abandoned house, he found 2 corpses inside, just as he remembered. In his last life, those bodies were found beside Alina's, and their deaths had been used to frame her. One of them was the son of Degard, killed with his escort to ignite war. He couldn't let the evidence remain. Ghislaine lit the house ablaze, watching as the flames consumed them. Then he gently carried his sister in his arms and walked away. From a distance, a hooded figure had seen everything. Silently, he vanished as Ghislaine disappeared into the shadows with Alina. The hooded figure reports that the mission was a failure, and chaos erupts around him. The others can't believe it. Frank, the man Ghislaine killed, was the best among them. Yet he couldn't even handle one girl. They wonder if Frank let his guard down, thinking it would be easy. The hooded figure explains that it was because of Ghislaine Perdium. They scoff, saying wasn't he just a useless kid? One man steps forward, standing out from the rest. He questions if they really expect such an excuse to work. Everyone in the kingdom knows Ghislaine is a useless piece of shit. But the hooded man insists that Ghislaine was completely different from what their intel said. Like a completely different person. He assures them he has already handled the Degard issue, and that this setback won't delay the territorial war. He begs for one more chance. They respond coldly, pointing out that he couldn't even gather information on one kid, and that his failure caused a major setback. In unison, they demand his elimination. Just then, a man sitting apart from the others speaks. He says they're being too noisy, and immediately, everyone falls silent. He asks what kind of chance the hooded figure is looking for. The hooded man quickly replies that he'll eliminate Ghislaine Perdium. The man in the high chair asks how. The hooded figure says he will naturally create a duel between Ghislaine and someone he has in mind. When asked who, he answers, Cain Loges, known for his powerful strength-based swordsmanship. The hooded man is confident no one can match Cain's strength. And since Cain is Ghislaine's cousin, it wouldn't seem forced. The room stays silent. The man in the high chair finally warns that if he fails again, there won't be another chance. At the Perdium training hall, the old knight tries to call Ghislaine out for lunch, but notices a mana string flowing toward him. It wraps around a sword and pulls it straight into Ghislaine's hand. Ghislaine is satisfied with the result, until he notices the old man watching. The old knight apologizes for disturbing him during training but is intrigued. He saw how Ghislaine pulled the sword. Ghislaine dangles the sword and asks if this is what he meant. It's called a mana thread, a technique to control mana like a string. In his past life, he used it all the time, but now he's limited by how much mana he has. Still, a single thread is manageable. The old knight Fargus is stunned. In all his years of training, he's never seen something like this. He remembers Ghislaine couldn't even use mana just a few weeks ago. How did he suddenly come up with something like this? Ghislaine asks if he wanted something. Fargus bows deeply and thanks him for protecting Lady Alina. Ghislaine brushes it off. Why thank him for doing his duty? Then he asks Fargus to join him for lunch. A few days pass. The festival is paused as the family's trusted guards were involved in a plot to traffic the young lady. Alina is upset. No one believes her when she says her brother saved her. She tells him to explain, but Ghislaine says it's fine. No one would believe him anyway. Belinda is furious, calling the traitors perverts. Ghislaine is just glad his sister is safe, but he knows their enemies won't give up. To protect them, he'll need to strengthen his forces. A maid walks in with a trolley and places a plate before him. Under the lid is just a piece of bread. He stares for a moment and asks Belinda why they're being served dessert first. She coldly asks if he even knows their household's current situation. Suddenly, shouting is heard outside. A fat man is demanding compensation for the festival's cancellation and has riled up a group of peasants. They yell at the guards, claiming nobles are swimming in money. Ghislaine asks what's going on. Belinda sighs. This is what she was worried about. The county is filled with merchants whose livelihoods depend on festival profits. Last year, things went smoothly, but this year's abrupt end after one day left them angry. Ghislaine hadn't considered that. He realizes they may become violent if he doesn't act. He asks old man Fargus to send soldiers to calm the crowd, but Fargus says they don't have any. Most of their forces were sent to the Forest of Monsters to rebuild after the orc raid. Perdium is constantly at war, barbarians to the north, monsters to the south. They have no money, no soldiers. It's a disaster. Ghislaine pulls Belinda aside and asks if she isn't the one managing his finances. He tells her to use some funds to pacify the merchants, but she tells him they have no money. His father, the Count, cut off his allowance because he was spending recklessly. In short, he's broke. He asks her to lend him money. She says she doesn't have any either. He asks what they do have if they lack both soldiers and funds. He's frustrated. Without money, there's nothing he can do. He jokes about how nice it would be if a pot of gold just appeared in front of him. Right then, a soldier bursts into the lobby, frantically looking for Ghislaine. It's Ricardo. Ghislaine asks what the rush is. Ricardo says there's a huge problem. His cousin Kane wants to see him. Kane had beaten the Knight Commander Black and Blue. He continued even when the commander didn't fight back out of respect for his nobility. His punch left a dent in the man's chestplate. Ghislaine arrives just as the commander collapses. The knight can barely make out his silhouette. Ghislaine is not pleased. The man who beat the commander steps forward, towering over Ghislaine. Kane. Looking at Kane pissed him off. He was the heir of the Loges County, the same county Perdium had an alliance with. Kane was Ghislaine's only friend and at the same time his arch-nemesis. Ignoring Kane's rude greeting, Ghislaine turns to Ricardo and asks what happened before he got there. Ricardo explains. They had responded to a disturbance at the tavern where they found Kane and his escort knight. Recognizing the knight, Kane had asked if the rumors about Ghislaine were true. So, the commander proudly shared the details with him. But Kane suddenly grabbed him and demanded to know if the commander dared to lie to the heir of Loges. And that's how it happened. Kane turns to Ghislaine and tells him to tell the truth himself. He says the commander lied, claiming Ghislaine trained, took down an orc barehanded and defeated traitorous knights all by himself. That's why Kane had to knock some sense into him. Kane steps closer and says all this wouldn't have happened if the commander hadn't lied in the first place. Ghislaine remembers, Kane was always like this, always treating him like a subordinate. Every time Kane visited Perdium, he'd make a mess, and no one would say a word because Ghislaine was always expected to obey. No one ever looked down on Kane. Unlike Ghislaine, who lived with an inferiority complex, Kane had confidence and a bold demeanor, qualities praised in a noble heir. That's why Ghislaine always got the short end of the stick. He smiles, thinking back. Kane expected Ghislaine to lash out at him like he used to, over the smallest provocation. A while ago, back at Loges County, Kane had been asked to kill Ghislaine. A hooded figure told him if he succeeded, the Loges family would gain the support of the esteemed one. Kane said it wouldn't be hard, he could kill Ghislaine, but not openly since Ghislaine was still a noble heir. So the figure suggested luring him into a duel, making his death look like an accident. The hooded man even offered to accompany him as an escort knight to make sure everything went as planned. This was a rare opportunity, even for Kane. The thought of killing Ghislaine with his own hands thrilled him. He was ready to leave immediately. Now, in the present, Kane wonders if Ghislaine was being targeted just because he had changed a little. He asks why Ghislaine's just standing there, and tells him to hurry up and bring the things they prepared. He wants to liven up the mood since the festival was interrupted. He reminds Ghislaine, they always worked in sync for things like this. He then asks in a threatening tone, was I wrong? Ghislaine, still confused by all Kane's rambling, suddenly remembers something. Kane used to make him prepare alcohol and women every time he visited Perdium. Ghislaine had always given in, because he didn't want to get beaten up. Looking back, he realizes he'd wasted so much money just to avoid Kane's wrath, and then it hits him. The pot of gold he'd been wishing for, it was standing right in front of him. Kane snaps him out of his thoughts and demands he stop wasting time. Ghislaine agrees to bring the stuff out, but before that, he says Kane needs to pay him back. Kane looks confused, so does the hooded knight. Kane asks what exactly he was supposed to repay. Ghislaine calmly explains. He's been covering Kane's demands for years. He'll settle for 1,000 gold plus interest. Kane scoffs. He says there's no way that stuff cost even 100 gold. He says Ghislaine only did all that as a friendship fee because he was thankful Kane treated him as a friend. Friendship, my ass, Ghislaine mutters. He's been Kane's doormat for long enough. He asks for the money one last time before he has to beat it out of Kane. He's desperate for gold. Everyone is shocked at the way Ghislaine speaks to Kane. Even Ricardo thinks he's lost it. Kane gets up, furious. He accuses Ghislaine of getting cocky just because Kane had been going easy on him. He says Ghislaine probably thinks he's strong now because of a few dumb rumors. He calls Ghislaine a leech, someone who's been sucking off his own land like a parasite. That's why, he says, people call Ghislaine a scoundrel. Kane throws a punch. Ghislaine doesn't move. He dodges it with a slight tilt of his head. Kane swings again. Ghislaine ducks under it and lands a counter hit. Kane coughs up blood from that single strike. Ghislaine follows it up with a clean blow to the face. Kane blocks it with a grin, but drops to his knees immediately after. The hooded knight rushes to Cain and asks if he's okay. Ghislaine taunts him, telling him to stop whining and get up because he knows Cain blocked the hit. The knight raises his voice on purpose, trying to draw attention. People quickly start gathering around. Ghislaine realizes this was their plan from the start. Cain flashes a smile at the hooded knight and asks how his acting was. The knight says it was perfect, and that now everyone will believe Ghislaine was in the wrong. It's more than enough reason to justify a duel. Cain reaches for his glove, thinking this was the perfect chance to cut off Perdium, a house already in decline. He pretends to be a victim and prepares to challenge Ghislaine to a duel, but before he can throw his glove, whap, a glove hits him in the face. Ghislaine had challenged him first, for insulting the heir of Perdium in front of his people, for assaulting a knight of his household, and for tarnishing noble dignity. Ghislaine demands a duel. Then he asks if Cain is planning to run away now. Cain is stunned. He says he always knew Ghislaine was dumb, but never thought he'd be dumb enough to dig his own grave like this. He accepts the duel, warning Ghislaine not to regret it, even if he dies. But Ghislaine isn't done. He calls out to Ricardo and tells him to bring all the merchants who were protesting at the castle gates. He says to inform them he's about to make them a lot of money. The atmosphere, which had heated up, suddenly cooled down because of the cancellation of the festival, leaving behind some tourists who couldn't return, full of regret. They must have felt unsatisfied since they weren't able to spend their money or time. In times like these, if an event were to take place to soothe them, they would all come rushing in. The duel was announced and the training ground was filled with people eager to place bets. They all wanted to bet on Cain. Even the merchants were able to make a lot of profit because of the duel. Everyone thought that betting on Cain would be the safest choice. Cain asked how Ghislaine dared to turn a sacred duel into a marketplace. He told Ghislaine that his sword wouldn't stop even if Ghislaine surrendered. Ghislaine realized that they were after his life from the beginning. He was about to start the duel now that enough people had gathered, but the hooded man stopped him, saying that a proper bet couldn't proceed since no one had bet their money on Ghislaine. Ghislaine didn't look surprised. People started saying the result was too obvious and that Ghislaine had no chance against Cain. Cain mocked Ghislaine, pointing out that even his own people didn't believe in him. Just as the merchant was about to change the bet to how long Ghislaine would survive, a man dropped a huge bag of gold on the desk. It was the commander, barely standing, asking to bet his whole life savings on Ghislaine. Ghislaine smiled, and another huge bag of gold was dropped over the commanders. This time it was from Alina. Even Ghislaine and the knights were surprised. The people couldn't believe it. Belinda said she advised against it, but Alina angrily told the merchant to hurry up. The hooded man left, knowing he couldn't insult Ghislaine any longer with Alina present. Cain said they were just wasting his time. The duel began. Ghislaine offered Cain the first move since Ghislaine was older. He unsheathed his sword in a flashy way and invited Cain to come at him. Cain was confused and asked if it wasn't a little too late for Ghislaine to act like the older one. As soon as it started, Cain lunged into the air and struck at Ghislaine. Ghislaine tried to redirect the strike, but Cain said that Ghislaine had already stooped too low to save face. After pushing Ghislaine back, Cain grabbed his sword and used the hilt like a spear. Ghislaine ducked under the thrust. Cain then tried to trample him with a kick, but Ghislaine had already moved. The crowd said Ghislaine couldn't endure a single hit from Cain. Cain smiled, hearing all the praise from the spectators. Belinda panicked and asked Alina to stop the fight, but Alina didn't seem worried. The hooded figure rejoiced, thinking it was already too late. Those who crossed swords with Cain were already trapped, overwhelmed by his immense power and consumed by the thought that they couldn't counterattack. They'd spend all their energy on evasion, eventually leaving an opening and meeting their end. That was how Cain always won. Cain commented that Ghislaine was as slippery as ever and admitted that his skills had improved. He spun his sword and used the guard like an axe. With a large swing, he said Ghislaine was always good at running. Then he hooked Ghislaine with the guard and flung him into the air. The crowd gasped, and the hooded man said it was over. He told Ghislaine to die as he fell from the sky. Cain prepared the final blow, saying he wanted to go easy on Ghislaine, but he had crossed the line. Ghislaine landed perfectly and, within a second, appeared next to Cain, and then behind him the next second. The hooded man noted that Ghislaine had stabilized himself by condensing mana into his legs. Ghislaine said Cain's swordsmanship was ignorant. that he must have thought he was strong just because his opponents got scared when he showed a little strength. Ghislaine offered to open Kane's eyes. Kane became furious and asked how a nobody like Ghislaine dared say that while swinging again. Ghislaine spun around and kicked Kane's hilt before he could complete the swing, using Kane's momentum to launch himself into the air. He spun down like a tornado, landing multiple clean hits. Kane went for a thrust, but Ghislaine rode Kane's sword, kicked it down to the ground, and swung at Kane's exposed neck. Before the blood landed on him, he disappeared, leaving Kane bleeding. The crowd was now scared for their money. They asked if it was already over and how Ghislaine could be so skilled. Alina proudly told Belinda to see why she bet so much. The commander, who couldn't even see the fight, was smiling. The hooded man began to panic. Kane realized the wounds Ghislaine had inflicted were too shallow, even though he could have made them deeper. He wondered if Ghislaine was doing it on purpose and how he could show such high-level swordsmanship. Kane glared at Ghislaine, who stared back, then threw away his sword. Ghislaine said that with Kane's lack of skill, there wouldn't be much entertainment for the spectators if he kept using a sword. He declared that he would fight barehanded from now on. Kane felt insulted. Ghislaine said he'd take the opportunity to educate Kane with his bare knuckles. Kane asks what Ghislaine means. Ghislaine replies that since Kane was no match for him in swordsmanship, he would take a handicap and offer a barefist fight, an area Kane excelled in. But instead of the original wager, Ghislaine would bet 2,000 more gold, doubling the amount he could win. The crowd erupts into chaos. The hooded man sighs in relief, silently thanking Ghislaine for being insane and glad that fortune was still on their side. The merchant announces the opportunity for additional bets. The crowd murmurs that challenging Kane in sheer force was outright stupid and bet heavily on Kane. Still, some have a change of heart and decide to bet on Ghislaine this time. Kane starts laughing, telling Ghislaine to go ahead and fight without a weapon. Grabbing his sword, he declares that he'll continue using it. Belinda calls Kane an asshole and urges Ghislaine to pick his sword back up, but Kane now has newfound confidence, believing he has the upper hand. Ghislaine simply replies that it doesn't make any difference. As Kane swings the massive sword, Ghislaine ducks and dodges with swift, fluid movements. He finds an opening and lands a punch to Kane's inner thigh, followed by an uppercut to the jaw. Kane's head snaps back and he begins vomiting blood. He wonders how Ghislaine could display such strength even while on his knees. Ghislaine waits patiently and tells Kane to get back up. He's just getting started. Feeling insulted, Kane charges in like a mad bull. But no matter how hard he swings, thrusts, or fakes, nothing lands. Ghislaine grabs Kane's massive arm, bends his body downward, and lands a brutal knee to his side. As Kane spits more blood, Ghislaine starts pummeling his face relentlessly, punching until Kane's face looks worse than the commander's. Kane, bloodied and dazed, asks why this is happening. Ghislaine grabs his hair and says he pities Kane's father, Count Loges, who helped House Perdium even when it was on the verge of collapse, simply because he was friends with Ghislaine's father. But his son, Ghislaine adds, clearly had different values. Kane remembers. A few years ago, he asked his father why they kept sending support to Perdium even though their own house was struggling. He asked why his father was investing in a land that was withering away, like pouring water into a cracked bucket. He begged his father not to leave again, especially since he had just returned. He couldn't understand why his father was so insistent on helping Perdium when everyone else advised against it. The Count looked back and said there was no other reason than friendship. Back in the present, Kane sees another punch coming and flinches, closing his eyes, but it doesn't hit him. Ghislaine says that this might be enough. Surprised, Kane opens his eyes to find Ghislaine offering him a hand. Kane looks at his hand, then down at the ground and admits defeat. The crowd is stunned into silence, even the hooded man. Those who lost the bet are devastated, while the few who bet on Ghislaine during the second round are over the moon. Alina says she knew he would win. The hooded man runs to Kane, yelling at him, demanding to know how he could give up over just a small disadvantage. Kane stands and calmly says he's done. The hooded man panics, knowing their plan has failed. Ghislaine, having overheard everything, says there are no hard feelings for what he's about to do. The hooded man asks what he means. Ghislaine turns to the crowd and announces that the hooded man is volunteering to pay for all the meat and drinks for everyone gathered there. The man protests, saying he never agreed to that, but the crowd is already cheering for free food. The hooded man begs Ghislaine to withdraw the statement, but Ghislaine grabs his shoulder and tells him it's the price of losing the bet. He pushes the man down and reminds him to add 2,000 more gold to the original winnings, just like they agreed. With a menacing look, Ghislaine warns him not to even think about running away. He should know what would happen. The man can barely breathe as he stammers that he understands. Ghislaine walks away. The next day, back at the castle, Ghislaine receives a large chest filled with gold. He thinks it's enough to hire a small mercenary corps for a long time, but he knows it takes time to grow money and his enemies won't wait. He wants to move forward with the business he had in mind. As he closes the chest, he notices Alina and Belinda standing nearby with suspicious smiles. He asks what they want. Alina asks where her big brother plans to spend all the money. He asks if she wants some, but she says no. Belinda says it's obvious where he's planning to use it. Lady Amelia's birthday is coming up, and Ghislaine put on a show just to give her an expensive gift. She says Ghislaine is way too transparent. Alina isn't happy. She asks if he really did all that just to look good in front of his fiancée. Ghislaine is confused. He didn't even know he had a fiancée. He asks if he really has a fiancée. Belinda asks if he was embarrassed and says that she knows he was pretending to have forgotten. Alina says that they were talking about Amelia from the Count of Rayfold's family. He remembers now. He remembers her clearly, a noble among nobles, admired by the people for her kind nature and actions that transcend social class. But later, she will lead a rebellion and come to be known as the Witch of the North, and more importantly, with the Duke of Delphine, she also sang the hymn of Perdium's downfall, a traitor. He smiles and asks Belinda when his father is returning. She tells him that he would be back in about a week. That should be enough time, he thought. While leaving, he says that he was making a quick trip to the Rayfold estate. Belinda says that it's not even Amelia's birthday yet and asks why he's suddenly going there. He tells her that he's going to collect his money. Meanwhile, in Rayfold's territory, Amelia places her shoes on the ground and asks the kid to take them. The kid is surprised. Amelia says that if someone must go barefoot in her city, it would be Amelia alone. She asks her soldiers to provide them with food and shelter, and the soldiers quickly distribute the supplies among the people. All of them thank her while she walks barefoot. At her garden, while her guard cleans her foot, he tells her that she did a great job. She says that her father always demanded absolute obedience from the people, but the foolish peasants only follow those who keep them warm and well-fed. The bodyguard assures her that with her actions today, the people will undoubtedly follow her, and this would work to her advantage during the competition for succession. She looks at him and kicks him in the face and asks what happened with his duel with the Northern Sword Master. He apologizes and says that he was just trying to avoid unnecessary attention by losing. He grabs her foot and says that it was not yet time to reveal their claws. He kisses her foot and says that his sword belongs only to her. She asks how she could have raised him this way. Lifting his head up, she tells him not to be weak. She then asks him about the Merchant Guild and if it was the Actium Guild. He asks her not to worry about them. He says that they have been buying all the materials used to rebuild the ruined forest of the Beast Outpost, which was destroyed by the orcs near Perdium. In other words, they were reclaiming all the support funds that were sent to Perdium by her father each year. They were also recruiting and poaching knights from Perdium since they were skilled and battle-hardened by the endless war. She says that they were doing well, but asks him to keep it on the down low until they were fully prepared, and tells him never to expose that she was behind it. Just then, a butler approaches them. The guard gets angry and says that the lady was resting and asks why the butler dared to barge in. The butler says that there was a message from the front gate that His Highness Ghislaine Perdium had arrived. She asks why the troublemaker was there. The butler, sweating profusely, says that Ghislaine mentioned something about the Merchant Guild. Both of them can't hide their surprise. In the reception room, she meets Ghislaine. Ghislaine greets her. She doesn't greet him back. She says that it was rude of him to barge in unannounced and asks if he sold away all his manners and etiquette. He tells her that he came to give her an early birthday gift. He places a flower he plucked from the street and says that he found it in front of a guild. She asks what guild he was talking about. He tells her that it was the Actium Guild. She realizes that he knows everything. She stands and says that she doesn't understand anything he's saying. She proceeds to try and leave the room while saying that she had accepted his gift and asks him to leave. He calls her full name and tells her to sit, as if she was a dog. The pressure she felt was different. It was making the tea tremble. She wonders if this was the same guy who would fumble all his words in front of her. He says that he will keep it brief and asks her to give him 10,000 gold. She asks what he means, suddenly showing up and asking to borrow so much money from his fiancé. She asks if she should consider it the will of Count Perdium. Ghislaine tells her that his father has nothing to do with it. He pours the tea on the ground while saying that he knows full well she wasn't going to marry him. He asks if she was going to marry the knight behind the door. He tells her that it might have been possible if everything went according to her plans. But if word got out that she had been stealing the Count's funds to secretly build up power within the competitive succession struggle, before he could finish, the weird-looking knight tries to attack him. Amelia says that even as a joke, some things shouldn't be said aloud. He offers to keep everything a secret as long as he doesn't leave empty-handed. She says that he won't be getting anything from her. She calls Bernard her bodyguard. He quickly walks in, as if he was waiting to be called. He greets Ghislaine. Ghislaine just looks at him without saying anything. He knew that Bernard had skills on par with a sword master. Ghislaine warns them that a territorial war would be triggered if he died there. Amelia laughs and quotes, "A reckless troublemaker stormed in and was killed by the bodyguard, and that is how the world would see it." She then tells her bodyguard to kill him. The guard quickly unsheathes his sword. Ghislaine thinks that if they were going this far, he could get a bit serious too while grabbing his sword. The guard stood in front of Amelia, but Ghislaine noticed him smirking as if he had already won. Just then, he noticed something behind him. An assassin jumped out of the armor behind him and stabbed through the couch. Ghislaine rolled forward and kicked the assassin in the stomach, sending him flying out the window, surprising both the guard and Amelia. Ghislaine said it was quite the plan to attack under the guise of politeness, and called their hospitality very poor. The guard blocked Ghislaine's strike, and Ghislaine asked if this was the kind of manners they were talking about. The guard said Ghislaine was the one who was rude first, barging in and upsetting Amelia, and that someone like him didn't deserve proper manners. The guard locked Ghislaine's sword with his hand and thrust his own sword, which Ghislaine dodged. Then, Ghislaine spun around, kicked the guard's sword hand, and then his chest to free his sword, creating some distance between them. The guard had heard that Ghislaine was all arrogance with no real skill, but he was clearly not a complete novice at all. Amelia asked why Bernard was taking a scoundrel like Ghislaine seriously. She told him to quickly bring her Ghislaine's head if he truly was her sword. He listened and said he wouldn't disappoint her and told Ghislaine to get ready. Ghislaine asked how a mere escort knight dared to give him orders. The guard replied that it was his job to protect. They both got ready. Within a second, the guard appeared in front of him. Ghislaine barely moved out of the way. The guard managed to graze his cheek before he dodged. They started fighting on equal footing. Amelia wondered how someone labeled a scoundrel could fight evenly against someone like Bernard. The guard thrust at Ghislaine again. Ghislaine guided the sword with his sword guard and pushed it away. The guard used the same technique again, locking Ghislaine's sword with his arm and thrusting just like before. Ghislaine commented that the guy was just repeating the same moves over and over. He jumped, trying to kick off the guard's sword again, but this time, the guard braced himself with mana and said it wouldn't work. Ghislaine was slammed to the ground and the guard went in to finish him off. But Ghislaine used his signature move, using the enemy's momentum to launch himself to safety. He was impressed that the bodyguard adapted so quickly. The guard said the rumors about Ghislaine were wrong, but he always believed you couldn't know until you fought someone yourself. He noted that Ghislaine's swordsmanship seemed learned through real combat, not training, and asked if he picked it up while fighting barbarians. He threw Ghislaine's sword behind him and said that those techniques may work on the battlefield but not against a knight. He declared it was the end for Ghislaine. Ghislaine had expected to be in this position. His enemy's precise thrusts, narrow angles, and relentless stabs aimed at the head were messing with his timing and spacing. At close range, the difference in physical build made it hard for Ghislaine to overpower the guard with technique alone. He thought to himself that he was clearly outmatched, but Ghislaine said the thing was, he didn't have time to play fair. With one pull, the guard felt a faint presence of mana behind him. Before he could look back, the sword slammed into the back of his head. In the next second, Ghislaine's knee was right in front of his eye, slamming his face in. The guard couldn't even tell what had happened. Amelia shouted his name. Ghislaine grabbed his sword and struck from the air with full momentum. The guard barely managed to block it. He had to grab the blade itself to redirect the insane force. Once he blocked it, he told Amelia to leave immediately, saying he couldn't guarantee her safety beyond that point. He declared that he would now be fighting with everything on the line. Ghislaine remarked that the guard had quite the resolve, and said he had finally found a worthy opponent after so long. Amelia storms through the lobby looking for guards, while thinking about how Ghislaine dares to humiliate her like this. She wonders who leaked the information about the merchant guild to Ghislaine. She had thought that the rumors of him protecting his sister from assassins and killing orcs were all exaggerated information, judging from his past. While running around trying to find guards, she finds none. Then she goes to the main hall, demanding to know where the guards she stationed had gone off to. She finds them all in front of her, lifeless around a person. The mysterious woman turns around after hearing Amelia. It was Belinda. She says she hasn't seen Amelia in a while. Surprised, Amelia asks what Belinda was doing there. Belinda shushes her, already pointing a knife at Amelia's neck from behind. Amelia didn't even see her move. Belinda removes the spider on Amelia's face and asks why she still kept something so nasty on her lips. Belinda remembers that it was during Amelia's engagement ceremony when she overheard that Amelia's brothers teased her for having creepy spiders around her. So she raised a bunch of spiders to get revenge on them. Although Belinda wasn't sure if it was to overcome a trauma or a display of self-affirmation, Belinda apologizes for saying that the spider didn't really suit Amelia before throwing it onto the ground and crushing it with her foot. Then, she asks Amelia to kinda cooperate with her. Meanwhile, after Amelia had left, the air inside the room had gotten heavy. His opponent was displaying an overwhelming amount of mana. The guard asks what Ghislaine meant by an entertaining opponent. He says that Ghislaine sounds like a mercenary and dares to call himself a noble with the same status as his lady. Ghislaine asks why a simple bodyguard was running his mouth. The guard goes silent and then tells Ghislaine not to dishonor the nobility. With that, the guard goes into a rampage and attacks relentlessly, not giving Ghislaine any chance to counter. Ghislaine manages to dodge, but that was it. Ghislaine tries to parry as many of the attacks as possible, but the guard then informs Ghislaine that the next attack will be his last. The attack lands, blood spurts, but to the guard's surprise, Ghislaine had used his shoulder to deflect the attack. He counters this lightly. The guard agrees that he can't let his guard down in the slightest around Ghislaine. But after swiping away his sword, he kicks Ghislaine down and says that there is a difference between Ghislaine, who swings his sword for entertainment, and him. Ghislaine was quite entertained by the fight, but he was running low on mana, so although it was a shame, he had to end the fight. There was one thing the guard overlooked, and that was Ghislaine's unique mana technique with multiple cores. He unleashed a third core. The guard was moving so slowly to him that it looked like he was a statue. Ghislaine uses his sword's hilt guard to lock the guard's sword and disarm him, throwing his sword away. When he had realized what had happened, it was already too late. But before Ghislaine could drive his sword into the guard's head, he gets stopped by Amelia. She asks Ghislaine to take the 10,000 gold and leave. Ghislaine says that she should have given it to him from the start. Belinda jokingly asks if this wasn't a little too far for a lover's quarrel. Ghislaine says that they had a difference in opinion. Then he tells Amelia that he has unfortunate news for her. He says that the fee just went up to 20,000 gold for all the trouble he